Everybody, I would like to introduce Orpheotelest Rebecca Lynn Scott. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. As she said, I'm Rebecca Lynn Scott. I am an Orpheotelest of Dionysus and Ariadne. I come out of the starry crown tradition of Bacchic Orphism. No, nobody knows what that means. It's a very small, very new tradition. Okay. I'm here today to talk to you about something everybody does. Everybody dies. And why you need to be prepared for that, both practically and spiritually. I've got a lot of information to go through because I normally do this in like a 6-week course. So I've kind of condensed everything and left out some things, and but I'm going to pause at the end of each section to allow for questions. So first of all, why prepare? Well, because it could come anytime. You could die in 5 minutes. You could die in 50 years. Anytime death can come to you. And anytime you can be incapacitated. So it's important to have all of these things prepared just in case you can't talk about your wishes. So if you are incapacitated or if you die suddenly, your relatives could fight over what to do for you. And the fight can drag on for years if you go into persistent vegetative state, or if you die and they don't, and people can't agree on what to do with your body. You might die intestate, which means without a will, and then your estate could be in probate for months or years. And people couldn't get access to the things they need access to. And believe me, when you are grieving is the worst possible time to deal with that. Nobody wants to do that. If you have children and you do not legally designate who should take care of them if you die, they could go into the foster care system or go to the wrong relative. Please, 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 especially if you have children, please prepare. If you don't prepare spiritually, you might find your spirit in confusion after death, or if you're incapacitated, your spirit could be in confusion, unsure of where to go. You might find some part of yourself stuck in this world when you don't want it to be, when you want to move on. If you haven't considered the effects of being incapacitated on life support or organ donation, you might find your spirit having problems because of those things. And there is the question of who receives your ritual tools and sacred objects when you die. The very first thing I recommend that you do when you set out to deal with practical matters surrounding death is to make an account on what used to be called GYST, which stood for Get Your Shit Together, and is now joincake.com. Oh, I forgot to say, all of this information is in a tidily packaged webpage. You can find it on my blog, which is hex.ink, hex.ink/death-prep. Death-prep. Okay, so joincake.com, which will walk you through everything you need to do in multiple areas. It's great. That's all kinds of resources, all kinds of stuff. It's a really wonderful thing. The first thing that I recommend that you do when you set out to deal with spiritual matters surrounding death is to make contact with all of your holy powers and begin a conversation with them about this. Now, this is a conversation that can go on for the rest of your life. It does not have to end, but start a conversation with your holy powers. Any questions about why to prepare? Okay. So we will start with the living will and other legal tools available. So a living will, or more properly, an advanced medical directive, is Advanced Healthcare Directive, is a legal document by which you can make your wishes known regarding what happens if you are incapacitated and unable to make decisions for yourself regarding your care. It describes at what point you wish to be allowed to die naturally, what measures you do or do not want taken to keep you alive, pain management, and more. Also useful are a medical power of attorney, which designates a specific person to make decisions for you in the event that you can't, and, if desired, a do not resuscitate order. Now, a do not resuscitate order, a DNR, simply says that they are not allowed to take heroic measures to restart your heart if it stops. That's all it says. A medical power of attorney, as I said, designates a specific person, and this is super important. So we're going to take a little diversion for a moment and talk about next of kin. Next of kin is the person closest to you in a specific legal line, starting with your spouse, then a quorum of your adult children, then your parents, then a quorum of your siblings, and then further down you have other relatives, which are variously defined. And you can get into situations, this is very rare, but it does happen. You can get into absolutely terrifying situations where your spouse wants one thing, your parent wants another, and they get into a legal battle over it, and you are stuck. There was Terry Schiavo was a big case. That poor woman whose name I forget who was stuck in a persistent vegetative state while pregnant and was forced to stay on life support in an attempt to have her give birth after brain death. It was terrifying. So, but before you fill any of these things out, you need to stop and consider, to you, where does life begin? More importantly, where does life end? Now, for me, I believe that life begins with the first breath and ends with the last breath. And that means that I don't want to be kept on a ventilator, except for possibly very short periods of time. But in general, I do not want to be kept alive if I have to be on a ventilator, because that's artificial respiration and it's just not okay with me. So you might also want to consider if there are treatments that you feel might damage your spirit. Some traditions believe that that there are medical procedures that can damage your soul, and you need to consider that. If you feel that being on life support after brain death could hurt you in some fashion or leave you confused, then you want to specify that you don't want that to happen. It's important to understand that while telling people your wishes verbally is a good thing, and you need to do this, it's not legally enforceable. And grieving people may make other decisions for you. Such a difficult time can also bring out family tensions, especially between spouses and other relatives, or within a family. And oh boy, this can be a big mess. And this can be reflected in disagreements about what to be done. And this is especially true if you are a pagan and your family is not, and they don't share your beliefs, and they have their own beliefs that are very much at odds with yours. And that can be really, really dangerous to us. So you really want to use these tools. You really want to use the living will. You really, if you feel it's necessary, you really want to get your medical power of attorney and your do not resuscitate order. One simple and easy living will form is the 5 wishes form, which can be found at 5wishes.org. $5. They send it to you in the mail. You fill it out. It's conversational format. Very easy to do. You get it notarized, and it's legally binding. In addition to these documents, if you receive a terminal diagnosis at any point, talk to your doctor about getting what is called, in my state, and this varies from state to state, in my state it's called the Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, or POLST. And this is just a single document that organizes all of this information for medical personnel. It's usually printed on a bright piece of paper, which is then one copy is kept with you at all times. One copy goes on your refrigerator or your room door or wherever they will spot it. So, and I'm going to take a moment to discuss death with dignity, also known as medical aid in dying or assisted suicide. As of now, in the US, that option is available in Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, Hawaii, Vermont, Montana, Maine, New Jersey, California, and the District of Columbia. I was thrilled to discover that that list had expanded since the last time I looked. Internationally, Canada, Colombia, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Switzerland have provision for some sort of form of assisted suicide. Now, there's a lot of detail about this that I'm not going to go into, but that is available on the site and is available at things like the Death with Dignity Institute, the Hemlock Society. There's a lot of information to find online. If you have concerns about this, I strongly encourage you to look this up. Okay. Now, I'm going to reiterate, again at this point, this is the time to stop and talk to especially your ancestors, because they have already died. Contact the ancestors of your tradition. Contact your blood ancestors. Contact your heart ancestors, anybody that you loved, anybody that still cares for you. Ask them what they advise. You don't have to do what they advise, but ask them. They love to be asked. Okay, and I'm going to pause for questions.
If anybody has any questions, please just type them into the chat room, or make like a little flag motion on your camera if you have your camera active. But I don't see anybody else with their camera active, so that's kind of a moot point. Please ask questions, folks. This lady is a source of invaluable information.
Yes, I see someone waving.
Yes. Did you have a question? I think that's Patty. Oh, she might have just been. She's on her phone. She's on her iPhone. So.
I made it in.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
I couldn't make it into the other one at all, but at least I got into this one. I was about to give up and just say, I'll watch him tomorrow.
Great to have you here, dear.
For your help.
Absolutely. So, without any questions,
okay.
Rebecca, I think you can continue on. This is all very interesting information, I gather.
Okay, so the next topic is organ and body donation, or cadaver donation. Again, this is a place to very carefully consider what you believe. It's very common modernly to believe, oh yes, you should just donate your organs. And I think that's fantastic, except that there are systems of belief in which that's dangerous, that's damaging to the soul. And if you're going to do it at all, steps need to be taken. I had to write an entire ritual for my tradition that would sever the soul from the organ so that the soul didn't get stuck. Because the ancient Greek belief was that if the entire body was not properly disposed of, the soul could not move on. And where do you fall on this? And you need to think about that carefully before you make any decisions. Now, if you're going to donate your organs or your cadaver, you need to make absolutely sure that not only is it on your driver's license or some form of card that you carry with you, but that either your next of kin or the person who holds your power of attorney knows your exact wishes, because they can stop this from happening. Write them down in a letter, maybe, just so they have it to refer to, just in case, because people forget things and this could be years away. So there are state and national registries of organ donors in most places in the world. Whatever your decision, go and look them up and make sure that you are correctly recorded or not. All right, that's that section. Any questions? Some of these sections get longer than others. Okay.
And welcome to the new people who are joining us. You can find the resource pages at hex.inc/death-prep. I posted it in the group chat for you all.
Okay, so I'm moving on to wills. So who needs a will? If you have stuff and you want it to go to particular people, you need a will, period. This includes if you are a writer or an artist or a creative person of any kind, and you have intellectual, or an inventor or something, and you have intellectual property. If you don't specify your wishes for your intellectual property, they may never be able to be published again. Or at least not until the copyright runs out, and that could be so long that everyone's forgotten. If you have minor children, your will is the place to designate who you want to take them. Now, if that happens, make sure that people know that those wishes are in your will, because your will may not be read for months after your death. So make absolutely certain that people know that that's in there. So a few common misconceptions about wills. You don't need a lawyer to make a will. There's lots of software out there. There's lots of sites that'll tell you how to do it. It's not as complicated or as scary as it sounds. Join Cake has got a bunch of links. And nolo.com, NOLO.com, has a lot of advice, and they sell software. There's the misconception that your will is permanent and cannot be changed. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, you should revisit your will every 10 years or every time you have a major life change. If you get married, change your will. If you have a kid, change your will. Somebody in your family dies that's in your will, change your will. If you buy real estate or any major, huge purchase, change your will. If your children reach adulthood, change your will. My parents still have my care in the will, and I'm 42. There's a misconception that if you don't own real estate or have a lot of money, and if you aren't old and sick, that you don't need a will. And that's not true. If you own a car, get a will. If you own a business, get a will. If you're a creative person, as I said, get a will. If you have minor children, if you have anything valued at over about $300 to $500, get a will. There's an idea that you don't need a will because you can just tell people what you want. No. If you die without a will, you will be stuck in, your stuff will be stuck in probate and nobody can get at it. Your spoken wishes are not enough, and a court does not have to abide by them. And especially, again, in the matter of children, the court does not have to abide by your spoken wishes. So things that do not belong in wills: funeral wishes and disposition of your body. Your will is not going to be looked at for weeks or months unless you tell them to look at it for your children. Don't put your funeral wishes in there. The funeral will be over. Care of pets for the same reason. Who gets small items, things under $300 to $500. Don't go in wills. Things that do belong in wills. I know I keep harping on this, but it's super important. Care of minor children. Who gets money, real estate, expensive jewelry, expensive art, your car, and anything else in that category. And as I said, who gets to control your intellectual property? And I mean, if you write poetry that you stick up on LiveJournal or whatever they're sticking them on these days, you stick it on Tumblr. There you go. That's a better example. If you put your poetry on Tumblr, get a will. So while you work on your will, I suggest that you examine your attachment to the things that you are leaving to people. If you're having trouble writing down who gets what because you are having trouble giving it up, that's an attachment problem. If so, try this exercise.
So what are we going to be talking about today?
Make a list of the 5 or so things, whether that's objects or collections, that you most treasure, the things you're finding hard to give up. Spend time with each of these things. Touch them, hold them, enjoy them however you do. Read your books, play with your action figures, really be there with them. Then imagine that you are gone. The things are still there, but you're gone. You've gone someplace else. And your things are lonely without you. They miss you. They want to be loved. Think of someone you care about, who you know will love your things and take good care of them. Imagine wrapping your things up in a big box with a shiny bow, and ribbons, and pretty wrapping paper, and leaving them somewhere for your loved ones to find. The last gift that you will give them in this life. See if that helps. Doesn't help? Consult a trusted spiritual leader. There are other ways of dealing with that, but that's my first suggestion. So, there is any question about practical wills?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I've heard that there can be wills that are disputed. Can you speak to that at all?
Yes, absolutely. I just had this happen in my family, in fact.
Oh dear.
Yeah, my uncle died a year and a half ago, and his ex-wife disputed his will, and it took a full year, for that case to be settled. Now, wills can be disputed for a lot of reasons, and it can take a lot of time for things to go through probate. 6 months to a year is not uncommon. Usually, something is, thank you very much for your sympathies. Challenges to wills come if they think that you were not of sound mind when you wrote your will, or if they think you were unduly influenced by someone, like you got sucked into a cult. Yeah, be careful. In my case, it was because my former aunt felt that my uncle had owed her money. So all of these are reasons that they can be challenged. There are others. There isn't really any way to stop them being challenged. All you can do is write your will as thoroughly as possible. This is a good reason. If you have reason to think somebody's going to challenge your will, this is a good reason to see a lawyer, because this is something that a lawyer can definitely help with, is to make your will tighter and less likely to be challenged. But there's nothing you can do to stop a challenge. And in your will, you will need to designate an executor. This is the person who executes your will. They take care of all the paperwork. They send out copies of your death certificate. They stop your bills. They do all of that, and they make sure that the terms of your will are carried out. Now, make sure you choose a trustworthy executor, and also make sure that your executor is not your primary mourner, is not the person who is going to be totally devastated. Like, my wife will not be my executor. I chose a close friend and asked her to be my executor. Are there any other questions? No, you do not have to leave at least $1 to some relatives. However, if you do leave $1 to relatives, A, it's a nice fuck you, and B, it means that that they can't challenge on the grounds that they should have been in the will and you just forgot. Because some people will try to claim that you just forgot to put them in the will. No, you carefully considered your will. But if you leave them $1 or some very small thing, then they can't claim that they were forgotten. That's what that's for. Can you change your will if your spouse passes it? Yes, absolutely. You can always change your will. If your spouse passes and you had a dual will, it is definitely time to change that. In fact, if your spouse passes and you have a will at all, it is time to change your will because your will have left almost everything to your spouse, almost inevitably. So, but yes, you can always change your will. Anything else? Okay, that sounds like it. So, and now I'm going to address the ethical will. This is a concept that comes out of Judaism. I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I will mangle it, but it is Zava apostrophe AH is the English spelling. Sva'a, I don't know. But the ethical will is an ancient tradition that comes out of Judaism, and it is a document. It's not a legal document. It's just, yes, thank you. It's just a piece of paper that says what ethical principles you lived by, so that they can be passed on to future generations. And in Judaism, you might have documents going back for generations of your family to be able to look at, or you might be able to go back and look at past rabbis of your temple or whatever. I actually think it's a really fascinating idea to have a collection of ethical wills for a tradition and make those available to the tradition in a single archive. Writing one is simple. Just sit down and in as organized a fashion as you can manage, lay out your ethical and spiritual principles. It has no legal weight. It needs no notary or witness. Should you write one? Only you can say. But if you feel you have a unique perspective, or if you're a leader in your community, it might be a good idea. Can your spouse change your will for you? I'm not familiar with that ability. I can't say for sure. That's a question for a lawyer, but I will look into that. Because that's an interesting question. Because your will is supposed to be just by you. Okay, any more questions? No, your will is it is your will, just like your magical will is your will. It is yours. I suppose if somebody had your financial power of attorney and you told the lawyer that they were coming to make the change, maybe something like that. That's all I can think of. Okay, so moving on. A magical will. Now this is a term I made up myself. And it just means a way to communicate who gets your religious and magical items. Because you may have things that are not supposed to be handled by people outside your tradition, that are not supposed to be handled by, people who don't do a particular thing, or that shouldn't be handled by anybody and should be buried or destroyed or something. So I recommend that those of us who have those things, pardon me, write a letter that details this, address it to a trusted spiritual associate, somebody, preferably somebody local, that you can just ask to go through these things and take care of them. you don't need to put this in your legal will unless you don't trust your next of kin. If you don't trust your next of kin, put it, or whoever is receiving the bulk of your estate, put a line in your will that says all items of magical or all items of religious, let's say, all items of religious significance, they're in this location, should go to this person. A lawyer's going to tell you don't need to do that, but you might need to do that, practically speaking, as a pagan. So, all right. Any other questions?
Yeah. So you were mentioning, and you might touch on this later, I'm not sure, but you were mentioning that you shouldn't put your wishes as to burial rights, etc., in your will.
Next
Where
time.
should? Oh,
Very
okay.
next time.
There you go. I am anticipating. Woohoo!
All right. Anything else? Okay. Moving on. All right. So what you do is you write a letter to your next of kin that lays out your burial wishes. You want this to include, oh, and by the way, you can't will your body to a person because bodies can't be owned. Okay, so you want to write a letter to your next of kin. And your next of kin, that order we discussed, your next of kin is usually the person who will take legal custody of your body and make the arrangements. Some states in the US, and I don't know about internationally, I apologize. Some states, yes, you could designate that your body be donated to science. I actually did discuss that earlier. There are registries for that. You can, but you don't use your will to do it. You sign up with a registry that specifies exactly where your body will be sent, and then you tell your next of kin that that's happening. Okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. In some states, you can use some form of legal document to designate that somebody other than your next of kin gets to take care of your body. In some states, that's a letter, just a notarized letter. In some states, that's part of your medical power of attorney. But it varies. You'll want to at least look up, you don't necessarily have to ask the lawyer, but you want to look up the laws in your locality. If anybody wants to contact me, I'm happy to help you look those up, although most of my resources are for the United States. I'll just warn you. Unfortunately, there is at least one state in which not only is there no way to designate who gets your body, literally the first member of your family who shows up to take charge of it gets to take charge of it. And that's Virginia. And I find that terrifying. Yeah. Also, in at least one state, the only legal wish you can make that your kin have to follow is if you prepay your funeral arrangements. If you do that, then they have to use that. If you don't, they can do anything they want. So, yeah. So, having mentioned prepaid contracts, let me talk a little bit about those. This is just, you contact a funeral home, you say, I want to prepay my funeral. You make your arrangements, you tell them what kind of flowers you want, what kind of, this, that, and the other thing, what kind of casket, whatever, whether you want to be buried or cremated, that's the big one. And then you pay them in installments and get it all covered. Now, there are problems in the funeral industry. And some of just like there are unethical car salesmen, there are unethical funeral people. And they will take your money. Yeah, that happens. Someone's, yeah, bad things happen. So carefully, before you get a prepaid funeral, carefully investigate what you're getting into. Investigate your state laws, investigate the particular entity you're talking to. If you want to be cremated, I strongly recommend the Neptune Society, which has presences in most United States. And they are a nonprofit and really awesome. And they have some fantastic options, including the columbarium in San Francisco, and having your ashes mixed into concrete to be made into an artificial coral reef, which I've always loved. On the other hand, if you do want to be buried, paying for a cemetery plot or a group of them for your family, that's usually a safe buy. Now, if you want to leave money specifically to pay for your funeral and not prepay a contract, don't set aside that money in your will, because again, your will is going to be read too late. If you're worried there's not going to be the money to cover it, what you want to do is you want to get what's called a pay on death bank account. And what this is you put you on the bank account and you put whoever you want to take care of your funeral arrangements down as the pay on death designee. And all they have to do is show up with the death certificate and they get the money. There are also in some places such things as pay on or transfer on death deeds, which I need to get on my house, as that's just become available in my state. If I die, it goes straight to my wife. It does not go through probate. So once you've found out or designated someone to take charge of your body, sit down and write an outline of what you want at your service. This makes things so much easier for everybody. Just take a few minutes and do it. It can be as detailed or as vague as you like. You can choose to have your funeral in a funeral home, in a church or chapel if you have access to one that you like. But you can also have a funeral in your home or the home of a loved one. Home funerals are legal in all 50 U.S. states, although some of them make it very difficult. You can contact the Home Funeral Alliance and the Funeral Consumers Alliance for more details on that. It's a fascinating topic. So when you've written your letter, make several copies, give one to the person who's taking charge, give one to somebody else, to another trusted friend, and you're going to put one in your packet that we're going to talk about at the end. That's a lot of information. The next topic is what you can and can't have in your funeral. So we'll get to that in a minute, but I'm going to stop and ask for questions at this point.
Yep, there was one question about, do you know if there are any places that allow funeral pyres?
As a matter of fact, there is exactly one in the United States. Unfortunately, you have to own property in Crestone, Colorado, in order to access it.
Wow.
There are other places that are working on this. But Crestone, Colorado is the only place that has it right now. It is called the Crestone Project. They have an open air funeral pyre. They used to do it hit and run style. They'd show up, they'd build your pyre, they put you on it, they'd burn you, and then they'd run away again. But that is the only place in the U.S. that I know of. I'm not familiar with the laws in other countries. Well, they make sure somebody stayed long enough to kill the ashes, but they didn't stick around to get caught. Okay, so let's talk first about what you can have in a funeral. You can be buried or cremated. You can have a green burial with no embalming, no vault, and no casket. You can have a tree planted on that grave, on a green burial grave. in Washington State, where I live, you can have your body composted and the compost delivered to your loved ones or donated to a park. That's called recomposing, and it's awesome. They are working on spreading that to other states, but they've only just recently been made legal here. So you can be buried at sea, although there are very specific restrictions on that. You have to go out beyond the boundaries of national waters. You have to have a special kind of coffin. Very specific, much more expensive than you would expect. In some states, you can have water cremation, properly known as alkaline hydrolysis, which is a it's a greener alternative to cremation. Cremation uses a lot of energy and vents quite a bit of carbon into the atmosphere. Not from your body so much as from the fuel used to ignite it. But alkaline hydrolysis is much greener, and it leaves a bunch of liquid that is clean and is good for the earth, and ashes. The bones are left behind brittle, and then they're cremulated, ground up into what we call ashes. You can have any number of things done if you are cremated, done with your ashes if you're cremated. They're properly called cremains, not ashes, because they're not really ashes. But you can have them buried. You can have them placed in a niche. A wall or a building of niches is called the columbarium. You can have them scattered in various places. Although technically you can't have them scattered in water that is not international water. Everybody does it anyway, but you're not supposed to. You can have them made into a diamond. You can have them shot into space. And as I said, you can have them made into a reef. You may or may not be able to have your unembalmed body transported from one state to another. Local laws vary, and the laws of the state through which your body passes do apply. So like, if you die away from home, or if you want to be buried someplace other than the state where you live, like this is a thing and you need to do some research. So, any more questions on funerals? Nope. Okay. Did I skip the you can't have section?
Nope, I believe you did. Oh, at a funeral?
No, I skipped what you can't have. It's not in my notes.
Oh.
Somehow I didn't make it into these. I'll have to fix that. Oh no, there it is. Okay. You can't have a Viking funeral with a fire ship. You can't have it. Because it's a matter of dumping into coastal waters. I mean, like I came up with a scenario under which you might be able to, like if you can find a sea captain who's willing to tow a wooden boat out into international waters and then set fire to it there, maybe. But I can't vouch for that. You can't have an outdoor fire accepting Crestone. You can't have your bodies cleaned or your bones cleaned and left to someone because it's not legal to own human remains. I know several people who are very sad to learn that they couldn't leave their skull to a member of their tradition. Okay, that covers the you can't. There's a bunch of things you can't have, but that covers the ones that I've actually encountered in pagans. Okay.
So it's legal to own cremains, but not remains.
Yes.
That's very unusual. At least in my brain.
I saw the comment go by that cremation averages around 3,000. That varies widely on where you are. I know a place in Washington where I can get it done for 700, but it is extremely unusual to get something like that. Yeah, funerals are expensive. Body disposal is expensive. California, yes, that makes sense. Yeah, there's no such thing as um, as an ossuary in the United States. You can't have one. You can't have a place with cleaned bones on display in the United States. There are, someone says, I miss the days of backyard garden burial. In some states, you can designate part of your property as a graveyard. This varies widely state to state. In some states, all you have to do is notify the state. In some states, it's totally illegal. In some states, you have to deed the chunk of land that the bodies will be buried in, and only that part of the land, to the state. My family actually still owns and still buries people in our own private cemetery in West Virginia. Not my end of the family, but some of the family, distant cousins kind of thing. Out back of the log cabin that several generations of my family were born and died in. So it is still possible in some places to have burials on your own property. But of course, first you have to own property. Okay. So now we've just talked about a lot of stuff that can be very heavy for a lot of people. If now or when you come to write up your funeral wishes, you find yourself struggling, there's a meditation that I recommend, and it isn't easy, but I really recommend that you do it. I find it really helps. So just imagine that you are dead. Don't imagine a specific death. Don't picture anything in specific, just you have died. You are hovering around your body. You are waiting before you move on to see what happens. And your funeral takes place. And you watch your loved ones grieving you, mourning you. Watch what happens. See what they think you want. And see what you like and what you don't like. And see what you want. Now I skipped a whole piece at the beginning of that. Before you envision your death, inhabit your body fully. Your tradition may have a method for this. I recommend starting with your toes. Feel your toes, wiggle your toes, move up into your feet, wiggle your feet, feel your feet, your ankles, move all the way up your body. Feel every part of your body. Feel it living, and then envision it dead. That you are no longer in it, you are no longer part of it. And then envision your funeral. It's hard. It is. But it makes it less scary to do it.
One thing I'd like to point out is that I think it's very responsible of us to think about these things before we get sick or before we pass. So that way it's less of a weight on those that we are going to be leaving behind when we do cross the veil. So yeah, this work, I really appreciate this a lot.
Well, I'm so glad I could do it. I've literally been attempting to do this as a workshop for 5 years. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to finally do this. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much, the Correllian tradition.
Awesome. Glad to have you do this for us. Yeah. But anyway, keep going. We have another hour if need be.
Okay. Well, we're actually close to the end. I thought I would go for more of this, but I thought this was going to take longer, but it's actually gone by really quickly. But we'll sit around Thank you very much. These are still new. They happened in the past few months. I'm very pleased with them. Okay, so remember, if you have family that you are not out to as pagan, that wouldn't participate, and you want them to be able to participate, you can have a secular service and a religious service separately, just like some people do with weddings. The Unitarian Universalists are really good for this, or you can have a wholly secular ceremony at a funeral home, or the VFW if you're a veteran. All kinds of places will allow you to make use of their space for a memorial service or a funeral. By the way, the difference between a memorial service and a funeral is a funeral has the body present and a memorial service does not. Fire dancers, yes, I love it. I am personally, since we have the time, I'll talk about this. I am personally a big proponent of funerals over memorial services. I think we have lost touch with death in our society. Our society has become highly fanatophobic. I write that word a lot more often than I use it out loud. And I think that one way that we can reconnect with death is to have, yes, I love that song, Dance in the Graveyard, is to have more funerals with the body present, to encourage people to touch bodies. It's not unsafe. It's not unhygienic. Touch your loved one's body. Give them a kiss. It's okay to do that. It used to be perfectly normal.
That speaks to me so hard right now. That speaks to my soul right now. And I completely agree. And I am so glad that you said that, because there is, I remember the first time I was at a funeral with an actual dead body, I didn't know what to think. I felt like it was so strange and unusual. I think I was 19 or 20. And I went up and I touched the lady's hand, and it was like not quite wax, and it was room temperature, and that was startling. And I went up a couple more times, and people just like frowned at me and looked at me funny for like going up to kind of absorb and grasp the realization that this person is no longer there. And that's always felt very weird to me, that they would look at me funny like that. Somebody in the chat room, Stacy asks, do they still allow the living room funerals?
Yes, I actually covered this briefly earlier. Home funerals are legal in every state of the U.S. In some states, they make it quite difficult, but it is legal. Absolutely, 100%. Do not allow anybody to tell you otherwise. The most difficult place is New York State, where they make you hire a funeral director to be present at a home funeral. He doesn't have to do anything. He can just sit there. Yeah. But home funerals are a fantastic thing. There's a terrific movement around home funerals. I really encourage you to look up the Home Funeral Alliance and the Funeral Consumers Alliance. Wonderful people. They do great things. And it's such a moving thing to be able to do. It's so amazing to be able to do.
Since we have some time, do we have anybody else who would like to share stories about death? Either that they've heard from others or that they've experienced themselves? What was your... Oh.
I actually have one more section real quick.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. That's okay. I wanted to make sure we were done with funerals before I did the last section, but we will absolutely give time to anybody who wants to speak. I was hoping to have time to do that. So the last section is called Putting It All Together. So you've done all of this work. You have all of these documents. What do you do with them? Well, you get a bunch of copies. You put one in either a fire safe or your freezer in multiple layers of Ziploc bags. Your freezer, if you don't have a fire safe, your freezer is the safest place to store it in case of a fire. If you can afford it, get a safe deposit box and put one in the safe deposit box and give somebody a second key to it and permission at the bank to use it. Give copies to your next of kin and your second next of kin and your executor. There are online services that will keep track of electronic copies for you and release them upon your death, just to make sure. I like to keep thumb drives with everything on it, with my copies, with my physical copies. Even if you don't do a pay service to keep those documents, I recommend that you use something that has an offsite backup, even if it's Dropbox, just so those files are stored someplace. You might wish in whatever your primary storage location is to include letters to specific loved ones, to minor children, to your spouse, to your siblings, to your parents, to anybody. And when you're done, when you have done all of this, there's one more thing I want you to do. I want you to celebrate. I want you to go do something fun and life-affirming, because this is really hard stuff. And you need to be reminded that you're alive. So go out and have a great dinner and a bottle of wine, or stay home and have really good sex, or go dancing, or whatever you do that makes you feel alive. Go do that. That's the end of my workshop. And thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do something that I wanted to do for so long. Thank you again, Liz, for being my tech person and my contact person.
My absolute pleasure. This was really quite something, and I'm glad that we met. I'm at a loss for words. This is just so much. I feel like my container isn't big enough. I'm glad that you have all that info dump on your page. I'm gonna paste it in the chat room again, just for anyone else. hex.inc/death prep. There we go. Yeah. So, does anyone else have any questions for Rebecca? Yay! Thank you, Stacy.
You're all very welcome.
So great to have you all here. I would love it if you could read the litany that you wrote for the Corellian ancestors.
I would be happy to.
Thank you so much.
What this is. 5 years ago, I published a book that I called A Litany for the Many Dead. It is a list of prayers to various groups of the dead. For example, we pray to our beloved dead, our ancestors of heart, of flesh and spirit. I open my mouth and I can't remember the prayer I say every day. Oh dear. Our ancestors of flesh and spirit. Nope, gone. All right. But there were 65 verses when I first wrote it. There are now 115 verses, and I've just put out a new edition. You can find it on Amazon. It's called A Litany for the Many Dead, 100 and More. So, thank you very much. So at Liz's request, and I do take requests, if anybody ever wants me to write for a group of the dead, I'm very happy to. At Liz's request, I wrote one for the Corellian ancestors. We pray to the Corellian ancestors, both named and unnamed, because of you we walk the path through black and white and red. We pray to the Corellian ancestors.
We pray to the Corellian ancestors. Oh, and thank you so much for that. When you had mentioned that you wrote these, I was just pushed. Like there was like no doubt in my mind. Like the hairs on my arms are rising up with memory of it, and I just was like shaking. Like, would you mind writing one for the Corellian ancestors? I was. Whew, I was moved by spirit. Oh, so
Well,
yeah.
I'm very glad that you asked me. It was a very good experience to write. I definitely heard them on that one, as I often do.
They're very talkative. If you let them in, they will talk to you. Oh goodness. Would anybody like to make any remarks or anything? And if you guys want to talk about something and you don't want it to be recorded, I can turn off recording now because technically the workshop is over and I want to give you guys plenty of space to talk like freely without fear of judgment or any of that.
Yeah, let's turn off recording and hold a death cafe.
Sure. Why?
Death
Why
cafe
not?
is a wonderful, wonderful tradition in which people get together and sit around and talk about death, and that's all it is. It's
cool. I am turning off recording now. Thank you all for watching. Blessed be. See you next time.